It was the 7th of April 2009 as we set off from St Pancras, heading to Brussels where we will catch the Thalys Express to Cologne for our overnight stop. Although our hotel was literally right opposite the station, by the time we got there it was too dark to see very much. So it was not until the following morning that we actually realised we were staying right opposite the cathedral. Shortage of time precluded a full tour, but we did take the opportunity to look at the exterior of Germany's most visited landmark. Once we boarded the high-speed train, it wasn't long before we were travelling down the very picturesque Rhine Valley, heading for Zurich and the city of Chur, which will be the home for our next 4 nights. Chur is one of the oldest settlements in Switzerland and is also located on the Rhine, although it has quite a long history dating back to 3900 BC. Although it has the city status, by our standards, it's quite small, with a population of approximately 36,000 at the time of our visit. By mid-afternoon we were arriving in Chur for our stay at the Hotel Stern, just a 5 to 10 minute walk from the station, which was actually quite nice to give our legs a stretch after 8 hours on the train. The following day we were at the station by 8:30 to embark on the first of what was going to be several scenic journeys. Today's journey will be on the Bernina Express, which although it starts in Chur, travels all the way to Turano in Italy. We'll be travelling as far as Poschiavo, very close to the Italian border. Although we're having an out and back trip, our return will deviate to allow a stop-off at St Moritz. As the train leaves Chur, it takes us through some very gentle scenery, but gradually this will steepen and take us up to 6,000 feet. The panoramic windows in the coaches we were travelling in offered superb views, but the reflections from the super clean windows were a bit awkward for photography. One of the attractions everyone was looking out for is the Landwasser Viaduct. It was built between 1901 and 1902 on a very tight curve and is 213 feet high. With the locomotives now working on rack and pinion, we're climbing to the highest point of the railway, at Ospizio Bernina. Once over the top, we'll travel through a glacial valley before we finally start the descent to Poschiavo. After 3¾ hours, there in the valley is our destination. But any hopes of a leisurely walk round the town were soon dashed, as after arrival we only had 45 minutes to find lunch before boarding the train to return via St Moritz. Despite the brevity of our stay, everyone got back to the station in time to catch the train, although some had not had time for lunch. The route back to Chur retraced our outward journey in part, but diverted to St Moritz for a short stop. The coaches were not quite as smart as the ones we had on the outward journey, but they did have one big advantage: opening windows, which were a delight because they removed the reflections which had been so irritating on the way out. By the time of our journey to Switzerland, the skiing season was pretty much over, so St Moritz had lost some of its glitz. It was a pleasant enough 35 minutes before we caught the train to Chur, this time with entertainment. The following day was the 10th of April, Good Friday, and another beautiful day, with temperatures reaching 15 degrees as we approached the station for the 9:08 train to Arosa. Building on the opportunities of opening the carriage windows for photography, we soon had them open, but not for long. One of the local residents decided it was simply too cold and told us to shut them. It was a beautiful journey, taking about an hour to wind its way up the valley from Chur. We wanted to get on the cable car, and to our dismay it was going to cost us £35. But of course the views were absolutely worth it. Sarah was looking at her watch because she was ready for a hot drink, and of course there's only one thing you can have in a mountain location like this: hot chocolate. As skiing novices, we've not been quite prepared for the other must-haves on a mountain: music at high volume. As the flag shows, the wind was blowing hard at 8,500 feet, so we took the cable car back down halfway and enjoyed our lunch before taking a walk round the lake and then making our way back to the station by 2:30. As you'll notice, there's absolutely no problem with ventilation on the way back down. The windows were open the whole way. For the third rail journey of our trip, the tour manager took us to Lucerne. The day was to comprise a combination of rail, boat and narrow gauge, so plenty of variety to pick from. Without doubt the most photographed landmark in Lucerne is the Capel Bridge. Unfortunately, this 650-year-old bridge was destroyed by fire in 1993, but with tremendous effort was reopened again the following year. Regrettably, apart from a short walk around the waterfront, we had very little time to explore further. We had to embark on our lake cruise, taking us to Witznau, so that we could board the Rigi Railway.
Guy here, he does something.
As soon as we disembarked, the train was waiting ready to take us up the mountain. The Swiss pass unfortunately didn't work for us, so we still had to buy return tickets, even though we were only travelling in one way with this particular company. As you can see, the rate and angle of ascent is very impressive indeed. The original railway dates from 1870, which then used cogwheel technology, inspired by the Mount Washington Railway. It took about half an hour to make the journey, and as you would expect, the views became more and more magnificent the higher we went. The station is at 1700 metres, but we only had a short time to enjoy it before our train left. We're going to leave on the blue train, which will take us down to Goldnau. The reason for coming down the mountain to Goldnau was that we could catch an express from there straight back to Chur, completing the round trip. The following day presented us with another journey to look forward to, as we were travelling on the Glacier Express itself. Again, a very smart train with panoramic windows. Prior to this though, the staff at the hotel had gone to a lot of trouble to decorate the breakfast tables with Easter eggs, and they certainly hadn't stinted on the chocolate. The train actually starts in St. Moritz to Zermatt. We'll be riding on the section to Brig through the Oberlapp Pass at 2,033 metres. Although the weather was a little bit grey as we headed up to the Oberlapp Pass, the combination of lunch, scenery and panoramic windows was an absolute winner. And here we are at the Oberlapp Pass station for a very brief stop to allow the Glacier Express going in the opposite direction to pass. In contrast to the height we reached at the top of the pass, Brig is relatively low at 690 metres, so the terrain will change dramatically as we descend to the bottom of the Simplon Pass. In all, the journey from Chur took approximately 4 hours, which with the cinematic views from the carriage passed very quickly. Brig is another very old town with a long history, dating back to the 13th century. For us it was to be home for our last 3 nights of the trip, giving us a base to travel to Zermatt to see the Matterhorn, and on the following day to the Schilthorn.
Eichholz, Visp, departure at 14:38.
The Simplon Hotel where we were going to stay was at the end of this road. Our room was at the top of the hotel with a glorious view over the mountains. The following morning dawned bright and sunny, with temperatures at 21 degrees. Our journey to Zermatt was just like all the others that we'd taken. Train on time, plenty of seats and stunning views. Swiss Railways has a reputation for being on time, but as one wag in the group pointed out, this did not mean that they were necessarily fast. But with views like this to look at, who cares? We had no doubt at all that we were going to have a nice day. The journey from Brig had taken us about an hour and 20 minutes. There was of course no way we were going to set foot on the Matterhorn, but we were told that we would get marvellous views from the top of the Gornergrat mountain. And to get there, we would travel on the world's first fully electric cog railway, built in 1898. We were also told from the hotel at the top of the mountain we would see a panorama of 29 4,000 metre peaks. The journey was spellbinding, in that as the train wound its way up the mountain, the views switched from one side to the other. The mountain has a reputation for looking just like a real mountain should, i.e. pointed. And as we gained height, so did the scale of the mountain. The vistas just kept coming as the train progressed up the mountain on its 33-minute journey. At the top we had a briefing from our tour manager and some free time to wander. There was a path for those who wanted to get photographs of the scenic views. Of course this was an opportunity not to be missed. So intrepid as ever I gingerly walked round the circuit, holding on to anything I could easily grasp. All too soon it was time to go back down to Zermatt, but with the windows open we were able to enjoy the wide open vistas all over again. The original plan for the final day was to go to the Jungfraujoch, but for some reason this could not be arranged. So in part we retraced our steps to Interlaken and then travelled down the other side of the valley to get to the top of the Schilthorn. The mountain overlooks the valley of Lauterbrunnen, and to get to the summit we took a cable car from Lauterbrunnen station and then caught a narrow gauge train to Mürren, where we could get another set of cable cars to take us up to the top of the mountain at nearly 3,000 metres.
La chute là-bas à droite, le long de la falaise. Impressionnant. Tu regardes juste là, derrière la maison, là, regarde. Ça vient de partout, avec la fonte là-dedans.
It was a warm but pleasant walk through the village, and as ever it's one of the favourite locations now for skiing, with a total of 32 miles of runs. Historically it was a farming community, but due to its popularity with British tourists who first came in 1911, its focus now is mainly on skiing. Indeed, the evidence for this was standing right next to me in the cable car, in the form of a very pleasant family from Little Chalfont who had come for the snow. Coming into view now is the top of the mountain, in Piz Gloria, famous for its appearance with James Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, released in 1969, with George Lazenby and Diana Rigg in the lead roles. There's a small museum to the film inside the restaurant. The viewing platform afforded wonderful views of the valley, but there was more to come in the second cable car, taking us right to the top. By early afternoon the weather was visibly changing and the clouds were building in the distance. The tour manager decided in order to get us down, we needed to get into the cable car fairly quickly, before they got too crowded. The early exit was a pity, but thanks to the train driver, I got the chance to ride in the cab with him on the return journey to Lauterbrunnen. The final day had capped off a wonderful trip to Switzerland, but with some regret for not having seen the Jungfraujoch, we resolved to return, which we did 4 years later.